Welcome to Studying Law Around the World. I'm Claudio Klaus. In each episode, I talk with lawyers, law students, and professors from different parts of the world to talk about legal education, careers, and what the profession looks like in real life. We talk about the hard parts, the surprises, and the decisions that shaped their paths. Whether you're planning to study abroad, thinking about working in another legal system, or just curious about how law works around the world, this podcast is for you.
If you're an internationally trained lawyer or law student working in or trying to break into an English speaking common law system, you know that legal writing is one of the biggest challenges and one of the most important skills to master. That's where Grammatica comes in. I'm Rebecca Lockwood, the lawyer, mediator, educator, and founder of Grammatica International. We help lawyers and law students to write sharper, speak clearer, and land more interviews with on demand online courses, live workshops, and one on one consulting designed just for legal professionals. I have worked with so many lawyers like you who are exceptionally smart, qualified, and capable, but need some guidance to really stand out in a competitive legal market. And I get it myself, having lived and worked in 5 countries during my 17 years in law and education. Whether you're looking to sharpen your writing skills generally, refresh your CV, or draft an application for a law program, Grammatica can help. Visit grammatica.co to get started.
Today, I have the opportunity to interview Alex Klyguine. He's a tax lawyer and also the founder of Taxpayer Law. Thank you so much for joining us today, Alex.
My pleasure, Claudia. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. So to start today's episode, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story. So can you introduce yourself to our audience and share about your journey through law school, Bay Street, and also starting your own firm?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the genesis of it, I was born abroad, single mother, parent came to Canada with a couple kids, and it wasn't an easy life necessarily when I started off, but lots of people go through the immigrant experience, so it's nothing unusual for Canada. And so then I did my undergrad at York, I guess because I didn't really want to change the design on my wall in terms of the degrees. I wanted to make sure all the degrees looked the same and identical. I continued my journey at York, and I got my JD MBA at York, so all my degrees are from York. So now they look really nice and polished on the wall. And yeah, that's kind of been my educational journey. Went to Osgood and graduated. Wasn't really sure what to do with my life, but I did really want to provide for my family. So I got a job on Bay Street. Worked at one firm for a few years, then worked at another firm for a few years. But I was always an entrepreneur by nature. It it made sense for me to do my own firm. I think it was kind of always within me. I always had my own clients I found, and I always had the drive to build something of my own, whether in law or elsewhere. I started a business when I was, you can say 6 year old. So like I've sold things. I collected golf balls at golf courses and sold them. Did all sorts of little things kind of to make some money. So I was always kind of entrepreneurial by nature, so it kind of made sense for me to go and start my own law firm. And I don't think the big law path would necessarily give me the flexibility to do what I wanted to do. And I didn't necessarily want to do just law. I wanted to build a business. I wanted to do some investment stuff. I enjoy reading, so I wanted to spend some time reading as well. And so, having your own firm, you're free to do whatever you want to do. If you want to do a podcast, you can do a podcast, right? Which is great.
This episode of Studying Law Around the World is proudly sponsored by ITL Prep from Emond Exam Prep, the comprehensive resource designed specifically for internationally trained lawyers preparing for the NCA exams. We understand that the NCA accreditation journey can feel overwhelming. You can face many obstacles getting to success. Courses that cost too much, offer too little, or leave you more confused than when you started. That's why Emond Exam Prep created ITL Prep, a smarter, more reliable way to succeed. Our module-based self-study courses and expert-led review sessions are designed by actual law professors, many of whom are ITLs themselves or teach at international law schools. They know the NCA process, they understand your journey, and they've built these courses to guide you clearly through the NCA syllabi, helping you gain the understanding you need to be at your best for success on your exams. With ITL Prep, you'll gain confidence and clarity, whether it's foundational concepts or you're tackling specialized Canadian law topics. It's affordable, it's flexible, it's built with you in mind. And right now, we're offering something special. As an exclusive offer for the Studying Law Around the World podcast listeners, ITL Prep is offering 50% off all courses for the first 50 purchases. Simply use the promo code ITL50 at checkout. Casebooks and other resources must be purchased separately. Visit emond.ca today, that's emond.ca, and use promo code ITL50 to claim your 50% discount on NCA exam preparation courses.
Amazing. So I've read some of what you put there on LinkedIn. For context, a lot of my audience here in the podcast are early career professionals or law students. A frequent question that ends up coming over and over again is, how do you decide your area of practice? So I wanted to ask you, what made you choose tax? And I've read a few of your comments saying that it offers intellectual challenges, work-life balance, satisfaction. But was there a specific moment or experience that made that click for you? Or was it more of a realization that you had over the years?
Well, I think when I worked at a large law firm, what is helpful is that you're able to experience multiple practice areas, something that you don't necessarily get at a smaller boutique shop where there's one practice area. So tax is not something necessarily I thought of until I worked in the tax group at the time. I did take a few tax courses and I thought they were great. I also liked tort law though. So my first summer I spent in the tort department, the group's called, it's a tort group. So I was able to experience that. But what really attracted me to tax is just kind of, it aligned with the way that I think, and I'm more of a logical numerical thinker. And tax, in the basic essence of it, the Income Tax Act is, a formula. It's a very long formula and written with using a lot of words, but at the end of the day, it is a formula. So that's why I was attracted to tax. There's other areas, as I said, I like tort law, but I don't think it really, while I liked it, it didn't really make sense with my background. I kind of had a business undergrad, business MBA, so tax kind of made sense with that background. I could also see myself working in competition law. I like economics and competition law. I think it's another area that's quite interesting to me. So, but yeah, I think there's solid backgrounds, but the reason why I chose tax is because it just made a lot of sense to me. And you're right to point out that tax lawyers seem to be happy. Multiple surveys and studies suggest that tax lawyers rank often in the most satisfied, amongst the most satisfied legal professionals out there. And I think the reason for it is probably the fact that the tax act is like a puzzle. You got to try to figure things out. The law is always changing. It's impossible to know it all. You're always kind of digging through it. You're always learning. You're attending CPD events. You're able to publish a lot. Kind of challenge yourself and try to kind of find answers sometimes to questions that the answers don't exist, and you're trying to kind of come up with those answers using whatever information is out there and is available. So it makes it quite interesting. And I kind of, prior to this podcast, did a little bit of research, and it seems that results have showed that tax law associates had the highest job satisfaction of all practice areas, which is pretty awesome. And there was a survey which was done with the question: would you choose your practice area again as a metric for happiness? And 89% of tax attorneys said they would choose the same job again. So the highest of any practice group, which is pretty remarkable. But I've seen this before, so it doesn't really surprise me. It's not a surprising outcome, but what I think it shows is that it really is a terrific practice area out there. In terms of work-life balance, again, if you're in tax litigation, you have trials, of course, you have various discoveries, etc. But you have a calendar by which you follow, so it's kind of structured and predictable. Tax planning is also, it could be hectic, but there's an element of predictability. There isn't a lot of overnights, I find, in working as a tax lawyer, which also obviously helps with happiness and satisfaction.
No, that's amazing. That might, give some food for thought for people who are deciding which practice area they want to go into. And going forward, another of the facts here that I wanted to ask you about is about building a practice as well. You've built your own from the ground up, and I'd love to hear, a little bit about what are some of the hardest decisions you have to do. I know it's not always easy to leave the comfort of staying in a firm, and then also maybe like the learning curves that you have in those first years. And then also, what would you say to somebody who's considering the same path?
I think first thing, it would be helpful to have a few years behind your back, regardless of whether you're in tax or another practice area. I think it's really difficult to start a firm without having any practical experience. Law school doesn't teach you a lot of practical skills, and I think having that experience is very helpful, especially in tax where the learning curve is much greater. So I think that's the first thing that somebody considering going out on their own, I would suggest that they go and work somewhere so that so they can gain those skills and experience. So that's the first thing. But just starting off on my own firm, what were the challenges? I think one challenge is kind of to stay within your circle of competence, right? When I started off, I had 0 files. I left the work. You want to drum up some work, but you also want to drum up some work that fits within your circle of competence. And I'm using a term by Warren Buffett that he uses in the investment world, but I think it also applies to the legal profession. You don't want to necessarily dabble outside what your comfort zone is and outside what you do. And when you're starting on your own with 0 files, of course, there's potential pressures there to go out and just get work for the sake of work. But I think my advice to anybody starting off on their own would be to stay within your circle of competence and reject work that doesn't make sense to take on. I think it's helps with limiting potential liability. It builds that expertise that a lawyer has in a certain practice area. And that, of course, building upon that expertise is kind of a flywheel, right? You get better and better at something, and then you can get more work within that circle of competence and continue that flywheel.
Whether you're studying law in Mumbai or practicing in Manhattan, Rev can help you transcribe and analyze all your case materials with verifiable citations. Learn more at rev.com.
So those are kind of the basic things. I think from a business perspective, you want to make sure you monitor cash flow, right? Because when you're starting off and you have no files, even if you get one file, you got to do the work, you got to send the bill, and you got to get paid. So if you think of doing the work, how long will that take you? A couple of months, right? Sending the bill, you sent it out. Let's say at the end of a couple of months, takes you a couple of months to get paid, right? So all of a sudden, there's no cash for 4 months in my example, and that's tricky. So the first year is very difficult from a cash flow perspective. So it's as a result, it's important to kind of keep your costs down when you're starting off a firm. We didn't have an office, a physical office at the time, and just had a mailing address at the time when I started. Got your own laptop, law pro insurance, practice management software, perhaps, and some other tools, but very, very limited. You don't need a lot of resources to run a law firm effectively nowadays. The barriers to entry into the legal profession are fairly low. After you get your law degree, actually opening up your law firm isn't necessarily that hard in order to what you got to do in order to start up a firm. It used to be much more difficult, right? There were a lot of administrative hurdles, but there are software tools now that enable you to send the bill seamlessly with absolute ease. They enable you to track your time, seamlessly with ease. It is much easier than it used to be to start off your firm, hang your own shingle, and start doing the legal work. I remember talking to a practitioner who probably started and ran his own firm in the 80s or 90s, right? And one of the things he complained about was that it was just too hard, too much admin burden in running your own firm. Nowadays, that admin burden is just lower, so it makes it much easier to start. Keep your costs low. Don't be afraid to hire, but hire careful. I think that's another piece of advice, right? Otherwise you'll stay by yourself all the time, and it's a lot more fun to work in a team, to build something. So we're fortunate to be growing and to experience some very, very good growth, and to have a team with us that's exceptionally strong for a smaller firm. And that's probably another challenge, is how do you build a team that's exceptionally small at a strong firm? And we just had to be very careful with our hiring, recruitment and selection process, and that's what worked for us. Kind of relating to keeping costs low and that cash flow crunch is you got to build timely when you're running, especially at the beginning, right? You do want to get cash in the door, and I think that's another piece of advice. You want to have a regular cadence of billing. So we bill monthly, for example. Every month, at the beginning of a month, somebody goes into the bill, sends them all out, and it's a routine, and everybody enters their dockets on time. And we send an email around the firm saying, it's the end of the month, enter your dockets because we're billing. You need the cash in order to keep the firm going and keep the firm growing. And with a growing firm, of course, that's a challenge, because you need the cash not just to kind of satisfy current obligations, but if you're growing, you got to ensure that you have enough cash for working capital and other things that you're investing in order to grow. Right? If you want to hire somebody, you hire them today, you got to pay them today, but it might take a few months for them to generate any revenue, right? So you got to pay today.
Amazing. That's fantastic. I think those are all things that people who are considering that path should keep in mind and tell very much about the practical side of it. So thank you for going into those details. I think that can be quite straightforward when you have the right guidance and the right, business mindset, but maybe it's a little bit daunting when you first notice all the big list of things that you have to do.
It is, and I find that what really set us apart, what because law firm is a law firm, but I think if you're creative in the way you do things, that really pushes you to be different, and that really makes the difference, I think, in terms of whether it's a highly successful firm or not a successful firm. So we're pretty creative in marketing. We're pretty creative in hiring the way we approach. For example, we don't do regular OCIs. We just don't go through the process because you're competing with everyone else, and we just decided we're not going to compete in that process. There's no need for that. So we hire differently, and we do marketing differently, and I think that's one of the key reasons for our success. So that's my advice to anybody starting your own firm is kind of think outside of the box, think how you can do things differently, try to take see if there's any paths out there that nobody's taken before. Perhaps there are, and perhaps they'll work really really well if you do take them.
Fantastic. And on that same note about creativity and all of that, I've read quite a bit of what you put out there on LinkedIn on work life balance, parenting, and so forth. And out of curiosity, I'd love to know a little bit about, how do you manage running a growing firm while staying present, both as a father, a partner. So is there any kind of like routine or boundary that is specifically help you, or it's kind of everybody's on board and time sometimes they're busier at the firm, sometimes they're busier in family. How do you specifically manage that?
I mean, I think it helps that I don't doesn't work doesn't feel like work. I mean, that's the first thing. To me, work doesn't feel like work. So I don't really notice when I'm working, when I'm not working. It just, every day is a good day, and I kind of just keep going at it. And I think another thing that was really really important is your team, right? Like, I mean, the team that we have at the firm is just so terrific, and maybe that's why work doesn't feel like work is because everybody's just so great and just does their part. And honestly, if it wasn't for the team, I don't know what we would do, what I would do here. So, I mean, I'm, you know, without them, I'm nothing. And my partner Igor is also, a terrific lawyer and a terrific team member. So I mean, I don't know if it's really just yeah. So work-life balance, I think from that perspective, it's 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 a mixture of kind of how you feel about it. I mean, if work doesn't feel like work, then what is work-life balance then? To me, it's all life. I think that's one aspect of it. From, I guess, a practical perspective, we are a firm that has a 1,200 billable hour target. I mean, that's a very, very low and reasonable target compared to a lot of firms out there. They have much higher, other firms have much higher target out there. So that enables people at the firm to have, I think, a work-life balance. And the fact that we work from home is another aspect, right? If you think about how long people spend in a commute, if you're going half an hour to work, half an hour from work every single day, 50 working days per year, you're spending 250 hours in traffic or on the train or something like that. We're a virtual firm first. We do have some physical offices where people can come in, but that's entirely optional. So that saves a lot of time, and that enables people that work here to have a real work-life balance. When you have a lower billable hour target, when you have no commute, it really adds up and makes it for a really enjoyable environment to be in, and for non-work obligations, non-work things to be part. It enables people to take part in things that they might not necessarily have time for otherwise.
That's fantastic. No, I love that. Beyond this aspect, I think another aspect that can be quite important is also mentorship and how you start that early on and how you see people who you admire and sometimes will give you some tips and advice, whether through like a formal mentorship or just really through being helpful. So I'd love to hear a little more about that in your perspective as well. If you had big influences that mentored you and helped you early on, and then also how that translates into how you try to be a mentor to others today.
Yeah, I think is there a phrase that you're a product of like the five people you spend the most time with? So I think it's helpful to surround yourself with great people that you can learn from and they can challenge you. I think that's important, and I think again having a great team around me is phenomenal. And we all mentor each other in some way, shape, or form just by virtue of working together and helping each other out. In terms of maybe like more formal, maybe not formal, but more people who I look up to, people like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are probably some of the people I really, really admire, not for necessarily their financial acumen, which is great, but just for the way that they live their life and the values that they uphold. I think that's really important. It's just you look at Warren Buffett and he lives a very, very simple life, a very humble life. And at the age of 94, he still goes into work and he does what he loves doing. I love what I do, and he talks about skipping into work, and I'm grateful that I have the same kind of experience skipping into work myself. So it's a lot of fun to do what you enjoy doing. So I really look up to people like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger just for their life lessons and principles that they're willing to share. Obviously, not directly, but through their writings and just watching videos and their experiences. It's always a good idea to learn from the experiences of others. I try to do that. On the legal front, I mean, I've worked with some incredible lawyers in my life, and you learn a lot from lawyers that you work with. A few names that come to mind, Gus Karanzulis, for example, he taught me something incredibly valuable. Always answer your phone call, right? So if you got a phone on you, you get a call from a client, answer your call. Clients really appreciate that. You have Pat Marley, for example, who's just not only incredible technical lawyer, but also an incredible, rainmaker. So, and there's lots of examples. So, you admire and learn from people all sorts of things. Alan Koenigsberg, another lawyer who, you notice how he treats students and how he treats partners, et cetera, and everybody's treated the same. And that's just, you observe that and you say, what a gentleman in the way that he approaches things. There's lots of just terrific lawyers out there who I was fortunate to work with at some point and to observe. Also, I can't necessarily call them all my formal mentors, but they're people that inspire me to be a better lawyer and who have taught me a lot along the way.
I love that. No, I really like that you mentioned that, especially when people might feel, that they need to have those formal mentor relationships. Mentorship can really be found anywhere. It can be found in books. It can be found through, seeing how other people live their lives. So I really appreciate that. It doesn't necessarily come from a one-on-one conversation of somebody who's continually checking on you and all that. So really nice insight, that one.
As we've been hearing from lawyers around the world on this show, one thing that's universal is the challenge of managing massive amounts of case materials. Whether you're dealing with witness statements in Sydney or reviewing contracts in Chicago, the volume can be overwhelming. That's why I wanted to tell you about Rev. Instead of analyzing documents one at a time, you upload everything to one workspace: PDFs, audio recordings, video depositions, transcripts. Rev's AI analyzes them all together and spots connections you'd never catch working file by file. Every insight comes with clickable citations that take you right back to the source. So when the AI finds a contradiction between witness statements, you can verify it instantly. Whether you're a law student or practicing attorney building your international career, Rev Insights gives you that edge our guests always talk about. Check it out at rev.com.
To wrap up today's episode, I was wondering if you have a piece of advice that you'd like to give to law students or lawyers who are just starting off their careers. These podcast main audience are people in that demographic right now. So I'd love to hear what kind of thing maybe you wish you had heard earlier in your career, or something that looking at the market nowadays you notice. Love to hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think law students have a lot of options. So they could go and work at a large firm, a small firm. They could work in government. They could not pursue career in law. I think it's all subject to individual preferences, right? And it's not for me to tell anyone what they will enjoy doing. And I think it's important for people to consider what they enjoy doing and making that decision. You know, I always thought that, I want to live my life in a way that minimizes the number of regrets that I have. And the path that I'm following is the one that allows me to do that, right? If I'm old, I want to say I lived the life the way I wanted to live it. And I find that sometimes people don't do that. Sometimes people do things for prestige or for money or for other things, and they don't necessarily enjoy their life, and they are not happy. I would rather be have no money and but be very happy with what I'm doing rather than have lots of money and be miserable. That's kind of been my general approach in life, and I think it worked really well for me, and I hope it works well for others. As I said, I skip into work every single day, kind of like Warren Buffett does. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy opening up emails. I look forward to Mondays. I mean, it's just some weird things for potentially for some people, right? But not for me. And I find that if you enjoy what you're doing, if you enjoy the people that you're working with, and you get the right spouse, the rest of the life doesn't really matter too much. Get those three things right, the rest is easy. So that's kind of my yes, parting advice is that try to focus on those three things as a student. Get a job or do what you enjoy doing, work with people you enjoy working with, and find the right spouse, and then the rest should just take care of itself in my mind.
That's fantastic. Well, Alex, really, thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of the podcast today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Claudia. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.